Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. And we're going to be ending the day of all these exciting AI investments and directions, talking about ways that we can be thoughtful about finances as well. So the focus is cost-benefit analysis, and overall, when do we want to make investments in Gen AI? When should we think about the ROI that's going to bring? So we can start today thinking about that initial question, sure. The ROI. When is the right time to make an immediate investment versus a long-term investment in your organization, thinking about from scratch, or if you've already started Gen AI initiatives? Maybe, BK, we can start with you,
sure.
And we'll bounce around.
Sure. So when I look at generative AI and its economic impact, there are three core pillars. One, it's the revenue impact that it makes. The second is obviously efficiency gains. There are two kinds of efficiency gains. One, entirely new set of use cases that have evolved that can now be solved by generative AI, which never existed in the past. And then obviously productivity gains that, general consulting, professional services, engineering effort can reduce. There are three components to it. So now if you look at, in terms of thinking about long-term, short-term, I believe the revenue side, it's still TBD in terms of cost-benefit analysis. Anyway, it's really a difficult, I would say, analysis to do. I mean, there's more of a science, more of an art than a science out there. But when it comes to efficiency gains, I mean, there are clear signs of, gains that are out there. I feel like productivity gains from an engineering effort standpoint definitely stands out. In fact, I come from a services org. We are seeing definite improvements in productivity gains. Recently, our firm was published in Google Cloud, which we are seeing around 30% productivity gains in things that we do. So that's definitely a short-term piece that everybody should look at. And then coming to newer set of use cases, those are still evolving. The tech is also evolving. You will see certain efficiency gains. You go from pilot to a prod, things vary. There's an org change management involved as well, as people who are used to doing certain tasks, certain business processes in a definite way will have to change their way of operations. So I feel efficiency gains through newer set of use cases should be the long-term view. Time to start is now. Start small, but then evolve as you progress. That's how I would think about it.
Yeah, I like the point about starting small, because I think one of the pitfalls when it comes to the investment side of things is you get this pressure, you're granted a budget, and then you start running before thinking about what last quarter or what the KPIs really are from a business perspective, and things can fall between the cracks. I don't know if others want to jump in here.
Sure. So I would say, in addition to start small, also think about areas of potentially lower risk in the firm to start and demonstrate basically the utility of the foundational models. One thing to consider also as you're thinking about ROI is that returns in terms of employee productivity really vary. If you're looking at more, employees who are technically inclined and do coding, a lot of times we see more productivity gains for the higher skilled employees, whereas for less technically inclined employees, you see higher gains for the lower skilled. So I think really doing your due diligence, going in armed with precise information, what to expect, and demonstrate to your senior management that you're able to use an off-the-shelf solution as a starting point. And something that Gen AI is really good at is taking information from various sources and providing a synthesized output, and that saves everyone a tremendous amount of time. So I think that's a starting point. Get your feet wet, and then from there start thinking about potentially moving towards something more complex, more customized, that may require some fine-tuning.
Yeah, I really like that. I think what's really exciting about the space is that there's this collaboration. There's some companies that are putting in billions and billions to the LLM side of things, whether it's the OpenAIs, the Anthropics. Where should you just take what's already out there and then build less internally until we do have some of the answers that BK is alluding to? Go ahead, Deepak.
I think for us, some of the key themes that we are focusing on So when it comes to generative AI or any kind of AI investment, so we have a fundamental idea. We need to have a business problem first or a value first mindset. A data AI should only be thought about as an enabler. So how can we focus on the prioritized business problem, which is one of the biggest theme that we focus on. To keep it easier for our, business leaders, we generally use a 3x3 framework based on the ease of execution and the value that we can create into 3 buckets. We call it do things better, and do better things. So do things would include initiatives where you can leverage the power of automation. How can you do search and summarization leveraging the power of large language models? So think about leveraging Copilot, Microsoft Copilot within our ecosystem as an example. Or we internally have a patent pending capability that we have built called the Mars GPT, which is essentially how can you maximize the value of internal both structured and unstructured data. The do things better would include slightly more longer term ROI, but significantly more investment and complexity increase. So think about new content creation for our ad campaigns. So those are some of the examples. How can we engage with our consumer better? So Mars snacking, very recently in our Euros, in 2024 Euro, we had a consumer engagement product that we released, which was like Jose Mourinho, one of the soccer coaches. You can engage with him. You can get him to speak whatever you want to and send it to your friends and whatnot. So an intelligent retailer, how can you leverage a planogram design, etc. And the last one, so do things better and do better things. New product innovation, long-term investment, a lot more time to get ROI. We built a internal patent pending capability called Brahma.ai. So Brahma, many Indians in the room. So for non-Indians, the word stands for creation. So Brahma.ai is one capability that we have built to look at external trends data, and we integrate it with our sensory data, the R&D data, to identify new product. Our chief marketing officer recently wrote an article about it. It's public information. So we are leveraging Brahma.ai for new product innovation as part of our DS2 pipeline, or like innovation pipeline. And we are doing a lot of innovation for chewing gum as an example, new product that we are identifying based on the market that we have never seen before, etc. So a lot of ROI that we are seeing, but scalable ROI for POCs we are seeing, but scalable capabilities across the globe which can have a tangible impact on P&L. That is a work in progress, in my opinion, for us.
Yeah, I appreciate the honesty with what we know and what we're thinking about the future. Dwarka, maybe we can go to you and talk a little bit about how that also affects operational costs. Like the second you make that investment, there's also the long-term scalability and all of the technical costs, really.
Yeah. That's a great question. So I think before going to that, maybe just one.
Yeah, answer it first and then we'll move to the next.
Small point. I think from our experience, we have seen there are certain applications which organizations really understand. They'll be very highly impactful for the long-term strategy, but either the language models or the AI models are not applicable to those kind of use cases because of lack of data. So I think those are the use cases which worth investing at this stage for a long-term benefit, because those kind of data can only be generated by the organization in their context. Someone else cannot do it. Even if the model gets better and better, probably you still need those kind of data, and that data has to be created in a hard way, right? Running that different processes again and again and creating that data, and so that when the model is ready, you can have the right data for training, right? So I think I would also add those kind of use cases needs to be prioritized. Now coming to your question, I think obviously we are at a very early stage of AI revolution. But what we have seen, typically there are 3 main pillars of cost. One is obviously your engineering cost, like the salary cost, engineering cost, that's most expensive. And then comes your, typically the data cost, right? So building the right data for the AI models to train and test and so on and so forth. And finally, I would say the software, hardware, and because sometimes because we are just using past solutions, so differentiating them is difficult, right? So if we want to optimize these three costs in different ways, there are a few levers that are available which we should be using, I think, as this practice evolving. A is that, bringing a bit more engineering rigor. I think we were in a hype cycle, so a lot of use cases were built without probably the right guardrails, engineering practices, right? I think as leaders, we are waking up to that reality now. So bringing up more engineering rigor, maybe, and it's very not easy to find in the market, right? So one of the things that we are trying to do within the organization is to bring the engineering skill from outside, not necessarily from AI side, AI engineers. So we are banking on typical, let's say, traditional software engineers, right, who are very high quality. They understand how good quality coding should be done and things like that, bringing in them, right, okay, so that your engineering is better. So you are creating reusable modules, you are not creating tech debts and so on and so forth. That is one cost. That will also reduce a lot of engineering effort in the long run. So that will reduce your cost and, you can scale, one part. The second part is, I think we've been talking about the whole day, is around, if we look at the use cases that we building, a lot of component can be built without using GenAI itself, right? So trying out, taking a step back and understanding, breaking down the whole problem statement, understanding which are the components which are not typically can be done without GenAI, so that the engineering cost is low and scaling can be easier. That is the second thing. And the third thing is, obviously, I feel, a lot of use cases we are building in the, pursuit of trying to run different models, different things, right? We do over-engineer sometime in the initial POC phase. So I would say initially it's better to go to a, commercially available model, build that POC or MVP, whatever you call it, and then do the product market fit first, then thinking about engineering, right? So that will save a lot of initial, let's say, capex, right? And then make you happy in long run, because the ROI is much better if you know the product market fit is there, and then you're investing in the engineering. So those are three things I feel. Apart from that, there are a lot of technical techniques, obviously, for cost optimization.
Do others want to add tactical ideas on how we think about scalability and reducing these operational costs?
I can add one point, especially on the large language model side, right? I think one of the barriers in terms of, or I won't say perceived barriers, I would say, in terms of usability of large language models and their actual cost in production is the way they're priced, right? If you look at everything that's coming out of the hyperscaler stack, you talk about Google, the AWS, you talk about Anthropic, etc. You've got models coming out. They're priced per token, but what does this token translate to in a real life use case? Whether you are doing summarization, whether you're trying to extract data from structured data or from unstructured data, at the end of the day, how can you convert a token to an inference from a page if you're talking about getting information out of a, say, document, right? So there is information asymmetry at this moment, right? I think so that's a perceived barrier at this moment. So the clarity of cost will eventually come as more and more workloads run in production. We saw that whole trend in cloud migration as well. From 2019 onwards, we saw a lot of production heavy workloads on cloud, and as and when the cloud bill started coming in, people started realizing what needs to be done, and we started going through an optimization cycle. I think that whole cycle will come on the LLM side as well. The other things a lot of players like us are doing is looking at finding smaller models, the 7 to 20 billion parameter models. Even if you look at Hugging Face, for example, you scan it every week, there are models that are out there. Can you look at some of them, bring them in, put guardrails around responsible AI, change weights to fit into a particular use case of a particular sector, and then can you run it completely containerized, right? I mean, it won't solve all your problems. It's one way to think about it, but at the end of the day, a combination of large language models coming from, or the APIs that are using, and containerized models will eventually give you a really good return on investment from a cost standpoint. So those are some techniques that we are currently evaluating at this point.
Other thoughts here? We can.
See, I think from on the operational side, I think one thing I want to double click on is on the adoption of capabilities actually. So you can build a lot of capabilities and I'm talking about AI capabilities in general, generative AI, not specifically. We have been building AI capabilities for a period of time, and can sometimes happen that we end up building a lot of capability. Large organization, when a product owner leaves, sometimes the capability itself goes dead, right? Like we would have invested millions of dollars in. So I think the adoption of these capabilities into the organization and integrating into existing organizational processes is going to be really important as well for long-term sustainability. I think that is something we should actively focus on. Now, large organization, we end up building a lot of capabilities, but 2 years down the line, are people going to use it? Is it embedded to a standard decision-making process? I think that is something we should actively think about, is what I would add.
Z, if you want to contribute here, you can.
Yeah, sure. I guess it really depends a lot on which industry you're coming from, right? So if you're in a highly regulated industry, if you don't have metrics to monitor and manage the risks around model performance, it's a no-go. So it's a waste from the beginning. So, I think, that's something that's top of mind for me and those of us, in financial services and banking.
Yeah, I think there's some strategies that you've applied and they work, and it's like a lot of awareness that we can leverage open source and use other, regardless of how well-funded your data or AI org is, the only way this is going to scale is if you take into consideration everything shared. And if it's not even applicable, that's equally, if not more important. So the next kind of section I want to get into is a little bit more optimistic, maybe stories where people have had seen real success. You mentioned a few already, BK, where you've seen generative AI already dramatically change your org, and then horror stories or recent, or this isn't the beginning of generative AI exactly. We've been working on ML for a while, so maybe we can hear some good things and some scary things that have happened with this safe space room.
Sure.
Get started.
So, I'll talk again from an efficiency perspective. That's where I think we're seeing most of the use cases. One, on the engineering side, we spoke about it, that's a no-brainer, kind of a low-hanging fruit. In terms of large-scale transformation, I think code migration, code generation, making sure testing practices, etc., are getting optimized. You're getting high degree of productivity. We're seeing real good benefits, and we have evidences as well. I can, without going into too much detail, we were recently involved in a large-scale data transformation initiative, getting legacy into cloud. You're talking about a lot of legacy code bases. Languages like Pentaho, etc. Right? It's very difficult. You have to go through the code base. Obviously think about migrating it as is. If you want to do a traditional implementation, timelines were 15 to 16 months for the first MVP. Using generative AI from a code migration standpoint, we were able to shrink it down to 9 months. So that's one real evidence that we have that has gone live. We're extremely proud of it. There are also instances where we had successes from a technology standpoint, but the use case didn't go through eventually. So I'll just walk through that whole scenario where it was, again, a RAG implementation where you are helping a certain set of knowledge workers do their jobs faster. It was basically going through complex documents, rules, and answering questions for adjudication. When went into UAT, you had a set of users using it. It was a controlled environment. Obviously, this particular group, you are talking about, it's an insurance use case, you're talking about adjusters in hundreds, but we had a contained group of around 50. The scores for every answer that came out from the RAG were really good. Everybody gave 4 and above for every answer that came out. But guess what? It didn't go through. The reason being, when you look at the cohort, you have a lot of experienced adjusters who have done this job for 20, 25, 30 years. And there are also a lot of younger adjusters who are new to the system. The younger adjusters liked it because it makes them do their job faster, learn faster, etc. But the experienced ones felt that, hey, I already know this. Why do I need this, right? And more often than not, they are the louder voices in a cohort when it comes to an execution or a decision making. So this is an example where the tech part worked really well, but eventually didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right, so basically it got stuck because the business felt, hey, I may not need this. So this long story short, identifying a use case where there is a clear-cut buy-in is absolutely critical. So 2 examples from
Yeah, the
articles
negative
that
and the positive.
Yeah.
I feel like they're always,
Yeah.
Do you want to add, Deepa?
Yeah, so I think one thing for people who don't know about Mars as an organization, so Mars has different divisions, and I'm on the Mars snacking side. I think, I've seen significant, exciting AI use cases on the Mars pet care division. I don't know, Shekhar, where are you, if you can? So I think you should catch up with Shekhar if you want to know how Mars is leveraging AI in pet nutrition, pet hospitals, pet health diagnostics. So there is a product called Fitbit for Pet, the Antec diagnostics. They leverage AI for cancer detection in pets, so a lot of use cases, real use cases, to make the world better for pets. On the Mars snacking side, I'll double click. See, the biggest advantage from my point of view, what I have seen, is how can we accelerate the adoption and excitement of the traditional AI use cases and drive the cultural transformation using the generative AI hype. So we recently started AI Learning and Innovation Lab last year. Now, since then, we were able to attract business folks in different levels, the top 100 leaders of the company to every associates of the company to come and take AI 101 training that we have done in partnership with Microsoft. This is an example. Now, this excitement about AI, it is about generative AI. I think it is helping us to transfer the culture of the organization to make it more data driven, more innovation driven, etc. So for one of our business units, we ran ideation or hackathon kind of a session. We got hundreds of ideas which we were able to prioritize into 50. Now, obviously, we can't implement all the 50 ideas, but we got a pipeline for the next 3 years on what are some of the high value items that we can drive leveraging the power of generative AI. When it comes, so the cultural transformation is one important aspect that I have seen. Then adoption and usage of existing AI tools, having a easier. We could argue that a NLQ or a layer to have a better interaction with the tools could help, but I think LLMs have helped the tools become more accessible to the team. So a traditional solution, we would put a LLM layer. People are loving it, I think. So that is what I would call as a tangible impact when it comes to leveraging Gen AI.
Yeah, I like that. Before we shift back, I don't know, Dwarka, you want to add more to this, but stay with this topic a little bit of instances where you can see success and where we can kind of look back at recent history. I really like your comments on the sort of data culture initiatives, like the way that data folds into AI, and AI is kind of breathing new energy into something that in many ways I feel as a data practitioner, we never really got to this place at a lot of organizations. So how can you leverage this? And maybe Dwarka, you can talk more.
Just to add on to what Deepak was telling, right? Just leaning on that. Essentially, because these models are able to understand language, right? And if you see at a high level, they're bringing people together in a much more seamless way. So I'll just take you an example. So we are working with a large automobile company where they have thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of vehicles on the road. When the vehicle breaks down, that comes to the dealers. The dealers have to, and sometimes these vehicles could be like 10 years old, 15 years old, depending on what they're bringing in, and maybe a small part is broken, and even the dealer doesn't know how to procure that part from the OEMs, right? And they will create a ticket with the OEM saying that, okay, what is this part number? And the OEM has to put a person there, understand what is it. And sometimes this question may come in German, French, Japanese, whatever language, right? And the back office will be somewhere in India or Philippines somewhere, right? So this whole process used to take 3 to 4 days to solve, because they will log a ticket, it will come, and then there will be huge queue of tickets that needs to be solved. So we deployed LLMs and basically multimodal capabilities there. Just through an image, it understands what kind of model what kind of key component it is, and then once the user says, okay, I'm happy with this, automatically order it, right? So the whole end-to-end journey, the lot of translation that needed from an image to machine, the part number or part code, and then translating it back to a German or Japanese or whatever, right? So this whole thing is being managed by your large language models in this case. But this is one part. But I think where we are really excited about is, if you see the whole existence of software industry is based on translation. So the business wants a solution, we understand that solution, and that someone converts that into a business requirement, that's a translation. Then some business requirement to a technical requirement, that's again a translation. Technical requirement to code, that's again a translation. And then it goes back again, right? So if you see, today maybe we're just doing at a very superficial level, very small component of translation, but that's where I think we are going, where it can translate a large chunk of the whole journey, and then create code automatically as much as possible, right? And that would be a great state. Like maybe business says, okay, I want this solution, probably not today, and maybe 30 years down the line, we have a solution ready, right? So that's what that excites us more. That could be a great use case some more in time.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this sort of start small comment seen once you've proven each small use case, and then you can go larger. Z.
Yeah, so in terms of another use case, and what I've seen actually in a prior role, something that used to keep me up at night, is when you have a reliance on older programming languages, and they may not be, the documentation may not be where you want it to be. I think what's been just very impactful and a great way to demonstrate value is how Gen AI can take that and translate it and document it into a new language. So that's been great, in addition to the example I gave about synthesizing, reviewing a number of documents and synthesizing the output. Those are two really impactful examples.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's other comments around this, or we want to move to sustainability and hardware costs, which are also something I think we want to consider before we conclude. But
on this topic on sustainability, hardware cost, I think topic is cost benefit analysis. I think pretty much everybody in this room going through a process of implementing a generative AI or an AI solution, you'll go through a business case or an ROI. I think one important factor here is to think about is that the infrastructure cost as it stands today will not be the same 12 months down the line. So when you build your business case, it cannot be an as-is case. So you have to factor in that some of the costs will change, actually will get better. The efficiency gains that you will consider will get better. So even if you do not have a really impactful, NPV at this stage, you need to have that, trust is one aspect, given the way things have changed from November 30th, 2022 to where we are right now. The second is, factor in that delta that use cases will get better. So I think that will be my comment, and that's been our mantra in trying to build solutions using generative AI, as well as suggest our clients in terms of bespoke solutions. Yeah.
So speaking on sustainability, right? I think the first theme that I want to share is that the sustainability as a principle, it should be driven by within the culture of the organization. So Mars being a family-led organization, I think we are very purpose-driven. We say that the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. What it essentially means is that being a principle-driven organization, not being focused on a quarterly result, more on a generational long-term investment mindset. I think the organization can sometimes take long-term strategic decisions when on some of the investments the company is making. Now, I'm going to talk about two different aspects, which is quite. I'll comment on AI, how we are leveraging to drive better sustainable outcome for our organization, and I'll also talk about sustainable usage of AI from a responsible AI standpoint. So, many of you might have recently read in the newspaper, California as a state, they are suggesting a new packaging guideline telling that if you are not using a recyclable packaging material, you cannot sell that product in California from, I think, 2033. It's a California Packaging Act. Now, as you would imagine, while many large CPG companies have products which are recyclable packaging material, some of the products might not have. Now, AI is a real valuable use case to give multiple scenarios and multiple options for packaging teams to think about sustainable packaging, which is one of the key principles of our sustainable generation plan. When it comes to driving better crop yield, so if you are in a chocolate business, cocoa sustainability is one of the most important thing. How can you leverage AI to drive sustainable crop yield? The visibility of the end-to-end supply chain is another area. So there are many aspects where we are leveraging AI to drive sustainability, which is very closely linked to our responsible AI principle as well. As an organization, we have decided that, and I meet Chegar mostly at our responsible AI events, right? So as an organization, we have a mandate that whatever AI we are going to use, responsible usage of AI is non-negotiable. It's very important for us. We have 5 core principles and 5 background principles of responsible AI, and one of the principles is sustainability, which is very closely linked. So, you work with the right kind of cloud provider. We work with Microsoft, and they have a commitment that, hey, all the data centers are going to be net neutral. So work with the right kind of partner so that you run the right kind of model in a sustainable way as well. And all of the principle of the company is very connected to the kind of partners that you would make, which is going to make the overall ecosystem sustainable.
No, okay, so we can kind of wrap and conclude this conversation. I want to summarize some of the points, and I've been kind of going back and forth, but there's a lot of actionable feedback, and then there's sort of the general ideas here, which obviously we need to be thinking about cost at every point with these the Gen AI initiatives. Starting small is a meaningful thing. Partnership, and that can be seen in a lot of ways. I think partnership within organizations, open source, leveraging Hugging Face when possible, no matter what. If you could containerize certain models, that's hugely meaningful. That's going to scale with you. Dwarka talked as well a lot about different ways that the translation of information between business functions, getting back to the models, the ways that LLMs can support them. He's referencing as well places where you really should stay away from AI altogether. The final kind of question was around value proposition and how do you frame Gen AI as a value proposition to the business so that you can justify things and then also not justify things. Mm-hmm. Dwarka, maybe you and then Z want to say a few words. No pressure.
No, I think quite a, basically, I think every organization is going through this phase where, we're all evaluating what to do next, right? So definitely everyone understands it's a transformative force, but how much to go in, how much to stay out. I think that's a critical question to always ask. I think as an organization, we already feel that it is a transformative force, but I think some very, very fundamental questions around business outcome and engineering excellence. That is very important. When they come together, then it's a scalable and cost-effective solution which can drive the ROI, right? So
Everyone can say a funnel. Would you want to say something, Beacon?
I mean, I think the point that you made was how do you create a business case around Gen AI, take it to your stakeholders. I think
value proposition,
value proposition. I think there's different facets to it. You have to consider, educating the tech to a certain group of individuals who potentially doesn't understand it. That starts there.
Yeah.
I think we are still at that phase. I think that's extremely important. You factor that in, then you show wins, start small, show wins for a larger initiative. You have to do that absolutely. And then change management. I think your value prop should start with, education, organizational change management, quick wins, and then the long-term plan in terms of how you change your org, as well as how you change your technology landscape. So it's a end-to-end business proposition that you would take into your stakeholders rather than project, use case, ROI. That would be my remit.
Yeah, so I would say, as you're thinking about ROI and having these conversations, just business common sense applies here. So if you're going to use it in something that you're leading in or that gives you a competitive advantage over other firms, or makes you a leader in the market, that's where you would want to even have the conversation about potentially building the model, from the ground up and putting all of that resource and money. Training alone can cost tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. So spending that kind of money on, things that are more operational or basically are in risk management bucket, I think that's a really tough sell. So, just think about what is the use case. Am I using this to differentiate myself, my business, or is it more just operational cost reduction? And I think that's when you look at, do I look off the shelf, customized, or build something? And do I, just the effort to get the expertise to build something from the ground up is tremendous. So not to be underestimated.
For me, the closing theme, so I think there is a very famous quote from Mother Teresa, which I keep on using. So it goes like this: not all of us can do great things, but all of us can do small things with great love. So my learning from this is that you can do hundreds of pilots when it comes to AI. I would, if I were you, I think my learning is that focus on very small few, right? I think pick your 5 hero products or 5 hero programs and hit the ball out of the park. You'll be able to add the biggest value to the organization.
Yeah, it's a very startup mentality as well. Start narrow and then go out. I connect to that. Cool. I think that concludes this side of things. 1 or 2 quick questions. Do I call in people? Does that work?
I think.
Go ahead, yeah.
Thank you. That was great. Suzanne, the pie grower. This is about the cost-benefit analysis with the most precious resource, which is time. So one of the factors I'm curious about from each of you or some of you is how do you make that trade-off when it needs to happen yesterday, when it's a threat to the business, an immediate competitive opportunity, or maybe you can't get more GPUs, so H100, so you need an MIX 300. What does that look like when time is out?
So I think great question.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to Gen AI right now, the general sentiment is, it needs to be done now, or as you said, yesterday. But having said that, you stick to your game plan. Anything that you rush here, you try to accelerate, there is a high degree of chance that you lose faith in the broader community. I mean, at the end of the day, this is potentially once in a lifetime tech that will change the landscape completely. Anything done in haste might result in you going back a few years, right? So I would sincerely urge that, you restrain yourself from getting ahead of your skin, right? Even if there is a lot of pressure of doing things yesterday, you stick to your game plan. And as I think there are a lot of comments about how to execute, you stick to your game plan. That will be my
Don't get distracted, yeah.
Don't
by
get
the-
distracted. Yeah.
So one thing that I would add is, many of us are in large organization. Large organizations, sometimes we intellectually align for 6 months to do 6 weeks of work. You don't move that fast. So I think maybe we should align faster to get things done is what I would say, right? Like when large organizations, sometimes, old culture, how to influence takes precedence as well.
Just to answer that question. So in financial services are very, very highly regulated, and the biggest challenge that we face is what's the trade-off between overtraining the model and the accuracy of the model. So what are your thoughts on that?
I can take that.
Yeah, Zio.
So there's very little room to have a lower accuracy rate, as you're well aware. So and that's why in this ROI conversation, it's very important to demonstrate that you're able to improve the performance of your model, to clearly document the rationale for why there may be a dip in performance. So we have to understand, not just see that the performance went down, but understand the drivers. So I would say, in our industry, it's actually a very difficult task to undertake.
You're not alone, is the,
Yeah.
There's one more question.
there's one more question,
I
I
think
think.
towards the end, yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So what is the timeline that the enterprises should have in mind for their ROIs to kick in? You would have seen a lot of implementations over the period of time. So how long, what is the lead time that they should have? Okay, for the next 2 years, I'm not going to expect anything in return with spending so much of cost on all their implementation, development and other stuff.
Yeah. Again, I'll go back to the answer that I gave. There are different kinds of use cases. If you're looking at pure productivity gains, you'll potentially see gains as it happens. You will start seeing benefits pretty fast. You'll start seeing benefits, during the time of the execution, right? Like the example that I gave. But if you are talking about use cases that were uncovered due to generative AI, never been tried in the past, you are trying it now, you have to be patient when it comes to return on investments. If you have a 5-year plan with the first year of implementation going to a pilot and then executing in production, I would feel that your break-even you should consider from year 3 or maybe potentially year 4 onwards. So that's a timeline I would say based on certain examples that I've seen, and it varies from use case to use case, but in general.
I think just to
Yeah, I think the appetite for anything more than 18 to 24 months is limited.
Yeah.
I can just say that from experience.
Yeah.
But I think it all depends on the type of use cases that you're taking up.
Yeah.
But I think essentially, if the use case needs a very complex chain of thoughts or agentic system that you want to build, probably take 18 to 24 months because there are so many complexities, so many training that you have to create, and training data, human reinforcement is required. So that will take a long time. But if you're creating a small chatbot, probably one or 2 months should be more than enough, I would say. So it depends, really depends.
So it's industry specific. So for CPG companies, I would say most of the transformational programs will run a 2 year to a 3 year cycle where you will be signing up for a big value creation for the investment that you're getting. Now, for making a substantial change in the way we operate, say, for example, like if I make a change to my plan on how to sell M&Ms, I think it will take 6 months for me to implement with the retailers, right? So it takes time in some of the industries, so it's going to be industry specific answer.
Whatever you can get away with, yeah. But I do think enterprise has longer timelines, so. These folks will be here for some time afterwards. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
so much.
conversation, and yeah, we're out.